verse. So the first was, forgive us our trespasses, and today we're going to talk about as we forgive those who trespass against us. So week 5 was about when you make a mistake and how you cope with your guilt, and the antidote to your guilt is to ask for forgiveness. Today, we're going to talk about when others make a mistake and the anxiety that that gives you and what the antidote to that is. So the antidote to last week was to ask forgiveness. The antidote for this week is to give forgiveness, but easier said than done, I know. So this is important because no matter who you are, no matter how fantastic you are or the people that you surround yourself with, people will wrong you, no matter what. And they could be on purpose or accidentally. They could be people that you love, people that you don't really know. It could be somebody that wrongs you in private versus out in the open. However it's going to happen, it's going to happen. But the question is how you will respond, because how you respond will determine whether you live a life of peace or you live a life of angst or in turmoil, right? And so last week, we talked about how he never meant for you to live a life of guilt. He never meant for you to wallow in your guilt, and that he chose a life for you and you are entitled because of him to a life that is more. Similarly, okay, you are entitled just by virtue of being his child to a life of peace. But how you go about obtaining that peace is very much within your control, right? So last week we were able to get rid of the guilt by asking for forgiveness. Today we're going to talk about what the antidote is to anxiety and turmoil as a result of people who have wronged you. So why is giving forgiveness so hard? So we have this inside of us, this I don't want to call it an instinct because I don't think it's an instinct, but this perception that when somebody wrongs you, if you are quick to forget about it right away, or you're quick to forgive them right away, then they haven't learned their lesson, or they haven't felt their wrong, and you're just a doormat if you do that, right? And maybe that's something that's contributed to by our society, right? Our society teaches you to protect yourself and step over everybody else that you need to step over to protect yourself, and everything is about you. Everything is very instant gratification, self-satisfaction, right? So maybe that's where it comes from, I'm not sure. But we have this perception that the easier you give forgiveness, the more likely the person is to do it again, or the less likely the person is to have learned their lesson, or the more likely you are vulnerable to being hurt again if you just hand out your forgiveness left, right, and center. And sometimes that's what makes it difficult for us to forgive, right? Is this fear of being somebody's doormat, or this fear of repeated offensive, this fear of always being hurt constantly and not being able to stand up for yourself or fight for what you deserve or whatever, right? Depending on how close the person is. So the question is, if society or whatever has made us believe that we're not supposed to hand out forgiveness like it's water, okay, what is his perception? Does he put a limit on forgiveness? Does he tell you that forgiveness only qualifies in this situation but not in this? Does he give you a qualifier to forgiveness? So I can tell you in Jewish law, before he came, they were told to forgive 3 times, okay? First time, forgive. Second time, forgive. Third time, forgive. Fourth time, you're out. That's it. You've maxed out your chances, okay? What did he say when he came? So I'm going to declare my bias here a little bit, right? For those of you who know me, I have 2 favorites in the Bible, Elijah and St. Peter. Top 2, always, okay? So I love this because you can see a little bit of Peter's personality coming out here. So he's coming to Christ, and Peter's the Jew of Jews, right? He's the one that represents the Jews and fights for the Jews and wanted to only preach to the Jews and convert the Jews, and he's all about Jews, okay? And I love Peter because I always make that joke about myself. When people say oh, are you Coptic? I bleed Coptic. I always make that joke, right? So that's Peter. He bleeds Jewish, okay? So he comes to Christ and he says, then Peter came to him and said, Lord, how often shall my brother sin against me and I forgive him? Up to 7 times, okay? And you can hear a little bit of the he's kind of puffing himself up, right? Because he knows that Jewish law is 3 times. But he's telling Christ I'm so gracious that I, the righteous Jew, would even forgive somebody up to 7 times. Like he's being like, just look at my righteousness. Like I'm dropping righteousness everywhere I go because I'm so righteous, right? Because in the Jewish law, this is silly, right? 3 is your maximum. It's all you're obligated to, and khalas, right? So he says to Christ, up to 7 times. Look how great I am. Up to 7 times, okay? And Christ's response to him, I do not say to you up to 7 times, but up to 70 times 7. What he's telling him is not an actual number, like you can only do 70 times 7, right? What he's telling him is that what you think is your maximum number of forgivenesses that you can hand out is 100 times more. Like what you think is the most, like Peter thinks that 3 is the bar, 7 is pushing his limit. Christ is saying no. What you think is your upper maximum is 100 times more, okay? This is revolutionary at the time, right? Like we know the Jews to not be like a very like approachable faith, right? So this is absolutely revolutionary at the time, right? So then he goes and talks about a parable. Can I actually get someone to read it? Because I'm sure you guys are getting sick of my voice. Okay.
So from I do not say to you. I do not say to you up to 7 times, but up to 70 times 7. Therefore the kingdom of heaven is like a certain king who wanted to settle accounts with his servants. And when he had begun to settle accounts, one was brought to him who owed him 10,000 talents. But as he was not able to pay, his master commanded he be sold with his wife and children and all that he had, and that payment he made. The servant therefore fell down before him, saying, Master, have patience with me, and I'll pay you all. Then the master of that servant was moved with compassion, released him, and forgave him with debt.
Okay, so what happened here? Okay, I don't benefit anything from the Bible until I kind of strip it down into my own terms, okay? So there's a king, and he's essentially settling up. I don't know, whatever. He wants to make a big purchase, he wants to buy a car or whatever, and he's trying to get all his funds from everybody who owes him, right? He's trying to gather his funds. So then he goes to the one servant who owes him, okay? And this servant owed him 10,000 talents. What is the equivalent of 10,000 talents in modern day? I don't know the exact mathematical conversion, but it's something like $3 million, let's say. Okay, like it's a lot. Like it's not a little bit. It's not something that you can be like, oh, 10,000 talents, be right back. I'm gonna go to the ATM and I'll be right back. Like it's like a lot, okay? So he was not able to pay. His master commanded that he be sold with his wife and children and all that he had, and that payment be made. Sold his wife and children, okay? This makes it sound like the king is a bad guy, but he's not. He's not, okay? The deal at the time is this. So you take a loan or you borrow or whatever, and if you can't pay it back, the understanding is that they start to sell off each of your things, and at the time your wife and children are classified as your things, to make enough money to pay it back. So the king is actually not acting unjustly, he's acting according to the law. Right? Like if I have I shouldn't take these examples because I'm not very good at money things, but like if I have like a mortgage on my house and I can't pay it and then it gets repossessed, okay? The bank is not out of line. The bank is acting according to the deal. We had a deal. I can't pay it back, and the deal is if you can't pay it back, this is the course of action, right? It just sounds so harsh to us because he sold his wife and his children like off as slaves. It sounds harsh. But it's the equivalent of your house being repossessed if you can't pay your mortgage. Is that the right consequence? Yeah? Okay. All right. So, the servant therefore fell down before him, saying, Master, have patience with me, and I will pay you all. Then the master of that servant was moved with compassion, released him, and forgave him the debt. Okay? So, not a bad king, somebody who's acting completely rationally. Okay? But if you'll notice, okay, after the servant says, just give me some more time, I just need some more time, etc. Like, give me some more time is just like a desperate man's plea. Like, there is no way that if I owe somebody $3 million, I'll be able to go to the bank and get it for you tomorrow, right? He's just saying that. He doesn't have it. He's not going to have it for a very long time. And the king understood that. But what a logical thing to do, from the king's perspective, would have been to reduce the debt. Okay, instead of 10,000 talents, I will give you a debt of 5,000 talents and you have 3 weeks to pay me. Reasonable. And if he had done that, he would have been labeled a gracious king, very much, right? That's a nice thing to do. There's no way that the bank is going to come to me and say, your mortgage is 100,000, only pay us 25,000. It's not going to happen. But this is the king being gracious, but that's not what he did. He was moved with compassion, released him, and forgave him the debt, the whole debt. Why would anybody do that? Now the king is out 10,000 talents. The king is out $3 million. Like that $3 million is yours. And now you're $3 million short for this guy. Why would the king do that? Because the king understood something that it is very, very difficult for us to understand. Forgiveness is not about the person that you're forgiving. Forgiveness is about you. Like, I don't know how to say this nicely, but like, you are not important enough for someone to care that badly if you haven't forgiven them. Like, no matter who you are, they'll get over it. Like, you're just you, whatever you are. No offense, okay? But forgiveness is actually about you. And what people don't understand when they hold these grudges and they can't let go and whatever, is they think that they're punishing somebody else. But the only person who's being punished in the absence of forgiveness is the person who refuses to forgive. Because forgiveness was never meant to be about the other person. Forgiveness was always meant to be about you, because the person who benefits the most from forgiveness is you, not the person being forgiven. Like, okay, maybe I'm a bad example because I'm a cold person, but like, if there's somebody who's mad at me, okay, and I try, eventually, okay, like, I'm gonna get over it. I'm gonna move on. Like, you go on with your life, I'll go on with my life. Not meant to be friends, okay, like, whatever. Like, I'm gonna move on, especially if I've done my due diligence to apologize and I've done everything that I can. Like, I'm reconciled, I'm happy with myself. That other person who's like stewing in their like righteous anger, they are hurting a lot more than I'm hurting, no matter what the situation is, right? And so what this king knew from this parable is that living a life of peace has much more value than anything like monetary or anything that is worth that level of angst or that level of turmoil or that level of conflict. And forgiveness is not about what you should do, okay? Like, and I want us to change that narrative a little bit. You shouldn't forgive because you're a good Christian. And you shouldn't forgive because you're a servant or you're a good person or you're a child of God and this is what you should do. That's not what it's about. You should forgive because you need to forgive. Like, in order for you to be okay, you should forgive. It should no longer be viewed as like a gracious act to the person who has offended you, but it should be viewed as a self-preservation strategy. It's not about the other person. That person may not deserve forgiveness, that's fine, but you deserve to be a forgiving person. You deserve to reap the benefits of what happens when you forgive people, to live that life of peace. It's not about them. It's about you. But it's very hard for us to shift like our mentality from making forgiveness about the person who's offended you versus about us. So today we're going to talk about 3 reasons why we need to learn to forgive. Okay? So we know that he has commanded us to forgive others. But why? Why is forgiveness supposed to be viewed as something that is more about us than about the person in front of us, okay? So number 1, why should I forgive? Because God has forgiven me. No matter what anybody does to you, no matter the offenses, and like, understand what I mean when I say that I know that a lot of people have a really hard life. And there are people that have horrible relationships with loved ones and things that are like unspeakable things done against them. I know that, okay? I know that. But no matter what offense anybody has committed against you, will it measure up to the accumulation of offenses that you have committed against him. We had that whole series like right in the beginning of the pandemic about like falling in love with him and whatever, and when we reject him, like the number of offenses that this person has done to you doesn't even hold a candle to the number of times that you have rejected him, that you have neglected him, that you have like compartmentalized him in a box. He's supposed to be your first love, right? Like if you draw the analogy to a human relationship, like would any person that you're in a human romantic relationship with tolerate being treated the way we treat him? No. And think about that like over a lifetime. It's like a lifetime of neglect, a lifetime of mistreatment. Like the person who defines love is the recipient of such lovelessness. Is there anything that anybody can do that is worse than the accumulation of what we do? Is there anything that anybody can do that can offend you worse than he should be offended by what we do? He's given us everything. He's given us all the instructions. He's given us all the tools. He's given us all the blessings. He's given us all the promises, everything. But still, in the face of that, we can't perform. And so is there anything that anybody does that compares to what I have been forgiven for? I can't speak for you, but for me, no. No, there isn't. And if you look at Romans 8:1, there is therefore now no condemnation to those who are in Christ Jesus. Like, he just, like, whatever you offend him with, whatever you bring to him, whatever you do that is, like, brutal, he just wipes it away. No condemnation, okay? However, this is not a blank check, okay? You don't get to run around the world saying, I'm going to be forgiven, I don't have to do anything to earn it. His forgiveness to you is like, we talked about it last week, all the 4 characteristics of it, okay? He wants to do it readily and instantly and blah, 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 blah. But the understanding is that you imitate him, right? The understanding is that you're not a jerk. You don't run around and take his forgiveness, and then every time somebody comes to you, you bat them away like flies. The understanding is that we're trying to imitate him. And the same way he forgives you unconditionally and counts nothing as too offensive, that you try and imitate your Father. It's not a blank check, right? And be kind to one another, tenderhearted, forgiving one another, even as God in Christ forgave you. The understanding is that what you receive from him, you then bring forward into the world. That is your responsibility as his light, as his messengers, as his vessels. That is your responsibility. How can you teach somebody about his forgiveness if you can't offer your own to them? Where's your credibility? What have you learned from your Father? Like people who are like me who have young kids, okay? There's like this rat race, right? Everybody's like, oh, look at their kids, look at their kids, look at their kids, right? And your kid could be the best behaved, but as soon as you walk into a crowd of people, your kid becomes this bananas crackpot. You're like, what are you gonna make people think that we teach you at home, right? And every parent's in the back of their mind, this kid's gonna make me look bad, right? I always talk about Toby's crazy, whatever. For sure, the first time he comes here, he's gonna just sit nicely and quietly like this, make me look bad, like I'm talking about my kid, like there's no merit, right? Think about that in the context of the faith, okay? If he has forgiven you and he has given you forgiveness and he has taught you about forgiveness, and then you go out into the world, their question to you is what are your parents teaching you at home? You talk about this faith, what's he teaching you behind closed doors? If the smallest thing and you can't even show mercy on somebody, the expectation is the magnitude of forgiveness that you receive from him, that you pay that forward. That then flows out into your interactions with other people. So continuation of the parable, okay? So far in this parable, the king says, whatever, you owe me $3 million. The guy says, I don't have it. Please don't sell my wife and children. And he says, debt erased, okay? Fast forward. Just set the stage, okay? If the bank tells me you owe 100,000, but we're only going to collect 25,000, I would be feeling very gracious. Dinner's on me, guys, let's go. Like, very gracious, okay? So what does the servant do, having just been forgiven a debt, not reduced a debt, okay? But that servant went out and found one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 denarii, analogous, okay? 10,000 talents, $3 million, 100 denarii, $6, okay? That's the analogy. And he laid hands on him and took him by the throat, saying, "Pay me what you owe." So his fellow servant fell down at his feet and begged him, saying, "Have patience with me, and I will pay you all." And he would not, but went and threw him into the prison till he should pay the debt. Well, that's a little silly. He was just forgiven $12 million. But this guy, who owes him $6, okay, gets thrown into prison. And the other guy uses the same words, "Have patience with me and I will pay you all." Like, it doesn't prompt anything? No. He would not, but went and threw him into the prison till he should pay the debt. Why was this servant not feeling gracious? Why was he not feeling so overflowing with the joy of the master's forgiveness that he wanted to pay that forward? Why was he not feeling gracious? Any ideas? So similar to what we talked about last week, I'm happy that I did these two in a row. Similar to what we talked about last week, okay? When we feel unforgiven, we act unforgiving, okay? So last week we talked about why it's hard for us to feel forgiven and the barriers that we have in our mind to understanding the magnitude of the forgiveness that he's offering us, okay? And if you've ever thought this, then you don't understand his forgiveness. And if you've ever thought oh, this is a punishment for, what I did last week, whatever, then you don't understand his forgiveness. Similarly, okay, the people that are sometimes the harshest are the ones who don't believe that they are forgiven. They are the ones that are still struggling and coping with some of that guilt, okay? This servant who was just forgiven, okay, I'm speculating here, don't quote me, probably thinks this king was having a good time today, drank a little bit too much, he's gonna wake up tomorrow and be like, "Wait, I need my money, where's my money? So I better go collect from everybody who owes me so that I at least have something to offer him." If you don't believe that you are forgiven, it is a lot harder for you to show that forgiveness. As opposed to when you are so wrapped up in the beauty of his forgiveness, you're anxious to pay that forward. You know what I mean? Do you get, there's a movie I used to watch, I watched it one time in high school or whatever when I was younger, and it was called Pay It Forward. And essentially the premise of that movie, it was a really good movie, Kevin Spade? I don't remember his name. But it was a really good movie, okay? And the premise of that movie is that an act of kindness so uplifts somebody's heart that it moves them to pay that act of kindness forward to the next person. And then that person is so moved that they want to do it to the next person, to the next person, to the next person, right? And that's the idea around this concept of pay it forward. And with forgiveness, it's very similar. When you understand and you believe that you are forgiven by him, you then in turn are so moved by his forgiveness and the abundance of his forgiveness that you are happy to do it for the next person. You are happy to pay that forward for the next person. But when you don't understand it, it's a lot harder for you to do what he said he's done for you because you don't believe it, right? Think about the parents who are so hard on their kids, right? Typically, what they're hard about is something that they have unresolved from their past. I struggle. I hate Kumon. Can I tell you guys that I hate Kumon? I hope this is never an advertisement anywhere, but I hate Kumon. My daughter's in Kumon. I hate my life when we're doing Kumon, okay? But with Millie, I am so hard on her with her Kumon because I was a very bad student, very bad. Like, I was one of those people that, like, me and my friends would go to university exams and we'd play guess the prof because we've never been to the class. We don't know which one of these people is the professor, which one is the TA, because we were like that. And I don't want Millie to be that way. I don't want her to be like me. She's smart. She can be a lot, okay? And so when it comes to her schooling, I'm very like, no, we gotta do this, because I know that I don't want her to be what I was, okay? I wouldn't say it's unresolved. I don't care that much anymore. But like, it's in the back of my mind that I want to protect her from that, okay? Similarly, when parents have something that is unresolved, it manifests as them being too hard on their kid because, like, they haven't, like, I don't want to say let it go, but like reconciled it. And that's what happens with forgiveness. If you don't feel forgiven, if you don't feel like this has been erased and it's no longer an issue, it's a lot harder for you to give that to somebody else because you don't even really understand what it feels like to have it wiped away. Does that make sense? All right, so number 1, 3 reasons I must learn to forgive is because God has forgiven me. Number 2, because the resentment from not forgiven makes me miserable. Also those around you, okay? But like I said, this is about you. It's not about those around you. So if my husband is a unfortunate casualty of my own bitterness, that's fine, but I'm talking about me here, okay? So resentment makes you miserable, okay? And we talked about the whole idea that forgiveness is often phrased as something gracious that you do for somebody else, when actually forgiveness is something that you do for yourself. It's not about the other person. It's not about what the other person, like how their life is going to be better because you've forgiven them. It's actually about what that forgiveness does to you and what benefits you get from that forgiveness regardless of that other person. So their worthiness or whether they deserve your forgiveness or not is irrelevant because the forgiveness is not about them or what they did. The forgiveness is about you. The other thing, okay, is that sometimes, like, what we don't see is the willing control we give somebody over our emotions, okay? I put this in here because I'm having this discussion with my daughter now. So my daughter is 3.5. She's in a class with kids that are a lot older than her, okay? So the oldest kid in the class, I think, is like turning 6 or whatever. It's just the way that their school is kind of set up. So she's like one of the youngest ones, and she's also very little, like, for her age, like from a size perspective. She always wants to hang out with the cool girls. And there's like these 2 girls in her class, Sedella and Angelina. And like, I don't obviously see her in her social interactions, but I can just imagine they're like these older girls, and she's just like little thing, like yapping at them, like just trying to be involved and trying to sit beside them and whatever. And so we had a situation 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago or whatever, and I've been trying to prepare her for situations like these, right? Because I know these girl things are gonna come and girls are mean and whatever. She came home, I picked her up from school, and she, Mama, I had a very bad day. What's wrong, Millie? What happened? Today, Sedella said that she doesn't want to be my friend. And she's crying, like she's upset. And I had prepared her for this, right? I had talked to her like, Millie, you know, whenever this happens, if someone says that they don't want to be your friend, you just say it right back, like, we're fine, we don't need anybody. Like, I'm very like on her about this, okay? Because I don't want her to be one of those kids that's easily swayed and whatever. So I said, okay, Millie, what did you say to Sedella when she said that? I said, well, I don't care, but Mama, I do care. I want her to be my friend. And she's crying. She's crying, okay? And so, like, I'm also trying to be sensitive, too, because, like, I'm not very good at, like, feelingsy kind of things she's teaching me and this kind of stuff. She's, like, if you guys were at relationship goals, she's blue, and I'm not, right? So I'm trying to, like, learn to, like, let her, like, have her emotion stuff out and talk, and I'm not good at it, okay? So I let her have her, like, you know, okay, let's talk. It's very sad, isn't it? Yes, Millie, is very sad. Hurt your feelings? Okay, we had a little cry fest. Now what? Okay? And I tried to explain to her that, and I always used to say this to my sister, she'd roll her eyes when she was in high school, that happiness is a decision. Happiness is within your control. You can decide that this situation has the power to get me down, and I'm going to mope in my room and I'm going to whatever. Or you can decide that you don't care and you're going to talk to somebody else. And she was already prepped for this because she said, I played with Scarlett instead, but I still want Susanna to be my friend and blah, blah, blah. But so I had laid the groundwork for this, but explaining that concept to her, that happiness is not a function of your circumstance. Happiness is your decision. You either decide to be happy with whatever the circumstance is, or you decide not to. But either way, it's within your control. And forgiveness works the same way. When you hold on to something that somebody's done, you have willingly given that control over your emotions to somebody else. You have given them the authority over your emotional well-being. As opposed to when you have forgiven them and it's wiped away and you don't care anymore, your happiness is now back to being your decision as opposed to their decision. And giving somebody that ability to control your emotional well-being, in my opinion, is not very wise. Because your happiness should not be dictated by your circumstances. Because your circumstances will change. The people around you will change. The people that were my closest friends 15 years ago are not necessarily my closest friends now. So your circumstances will change, and nobody should have that authority over your emotional well-being or your happiness. All right, so keep going with the parable, okay? So, king forgave the servant his debt. Servant was a bit of a jerk. Same situation happened, but he did not forgive that person, okay? So when his fellow servants saw what had been done, they were very grieved and came and told their master all that had been done. Then his master, after he had called him, said to him, "You wicked servant, I forgave you all that debt because you begged me. Should you not also have had compassion on your fellow servant, just as I had pity on you?" And his master was angry and delivered him to the torturers until he should pay all that was due to him. So this situation kind of came full circle, okay? So master was very gracious, forgave. This guy was not able to pay it forward, okay, for whatever reason, didn't believe it or whatever reason. And then the master said, the expectation is that if I do to you, then you do to others, and then delivered him to the torturers, okay? I like that term, delivered to the torturers, because when you hold on to bitterness or resentment, when you're not able to forgive, you deliver yourself to the torturers, okay? Like you walk yourself up to the plank, so to speak, right? Or you walk yourself up the Green Mile. You deliver yourself to the torturers because there is a significant cost when you hold on to that bitterness or resentment, when you're just sitting there and you're dwelling in that bitterness and resentment. Like the emotional cost, if I take Millie's very superficial example, okay? Like she came home, the first thing she said, she told me was, "I had a bad day." Like the rest of her day was worse because Sedella doesn't want to be her friend, right? And her social cost. Now, because she's so fixated on these people not wanting to be her friends, that's all she thinks about. And she's preventing herself from playing with everybody else and having fun with everybody else because she's so fixated on this one group of people, right? And to be honest, nobody wants to be around miserable people. I don't walk into a room and see somebody stewing in a corner and be like, "Oh yeah, I definitely want to be that guy's friend." You're not drawn to people that are in a cloud of negativity. And if you allow these situations to cast a cloud of negativity over you, not only are you suffering emotionally, but nobody wants to be your friend because you're miserable. And nobody wants to continue to be miserable, right? And then the spiritual cost, of course, is that you're putting the importance on that situation well above everything else, right? And your inability to forgive then has ramifications in your relationship with him. Because do you not believe in his forgiveness? Are you not grateful for his forgiveness? Do you think that you are entitled, but this person in front of you is not entitled? So the spiritual costs actually are many. And if you look at the verse from Job, one dies in his full strength, being wholly at ease and secure. Another man dies in the bitterness of his soul, never having eaten with pleasure. Like that right here is a fantastic summary of a guy who's able to forgive versus a guy who isn't. One, they both die, okay? But one is at ease, okay? The other one dies in the bitterness of his soul, okay? So the question is, who do you need to forgive? And why can't you? And if you ask me this question, when I was preparing this talk, I'm like, nobody. Everybody's great. I love everybody, okay? I can't say who you need to forgive or who you don't need to forgive. But there are indicators that there are people in your life that you need to forgive. Like, for example, I would be much happier if it weren't for X. That person is annoying enough to you for something that your happiness is contingent on that person. My job would be so much better if just this person would leave. Our servant group would be so much better if Ramas would just leave. Just kidding, Ramas. Okay? If there is somebody that is holding you back from enjoying something or like being positive about something, odds are there's something unreconciled there, okay? And like I said, I don't care what the other person did. It's about you, right? It should never be that you walk into a servant's meeting and be like, oh, I was pumped until I saw this person walk in. Well, now that person has just robbed you of your capacity to show God that you love him by serving. It's kind of silly to give somebody that authority over you, right? The other red flag is that no matter how nice somebody is, no matter what they do for you, no matter what they say to you, you will never have a good relationship with them because whatever is the offense that you can't let go of, right? And in relationships, it's not mistakes that break relationships. It's unforgiveness that breaks relationships. It's not the magnitude of what happened, but rather the magnitude or our inability to forgive for what happened, because people will always let you down. Nobody is infallible. The question is, what are you going to do about it? So we said, I need to forgive because God forgave me first, because resentment makes me miserable, and the people around me miserable. And the last is because I'm going to need forgiveness again from God and from others. The last line of this parable in Matthew 18 was, so my heavenly Father also will do to you if each of you from his heart does not forgive his brother his trespasses. I don't generally like to use scare tactics, okay? I don't do that. I don't do that with my kids. I don't like scare tactics, okay? But the reality is, I'm going to need him to forgive me. I'm going to need my husband to forgive me for something that I'm going to do inevitably in the next month, okay? Month, being so gracious, like 24 hours probably, okay? I'm going to need his forgiveness. And if my ability to forgive others affects my ability to understand his forgiveness, then I'm doing myself a disservice. I'm shooting myself in the foot. And you also have to understand what we're praying for. When we pray, we say, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. So, forgive me for shooting that other person in the face, okay? The same way I forgave X for sassing me, whatever, okay? So in your prayers, we're now drawing the comparison between forgive me the same way I forgave that other person. So then if I don't forgive, what does that mean about what I'm asking him? What does that mean about the comprehensiveness and the elaborateness of the forgiveness that I'm asking for if it's contingent on my ability to forgive that other person, right? Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. He wants us not just to forgive, but to be merciful people, to live mercifully to other people, because that is what he taught us. When they ask you, what are your parents teaching you at home? It should be this. He is teaching me to be a merciful person. And that's something that separates us from the other faiths in the world. Like, so my husband is very like Christians, and like not in a negative way, but like he like gets creeped out by some of the other stuff, like temples and stuff like that. He gets a little creeped out. Okay, I personally think it's fascinating. Like world religions, I was like, take me to the temples. Like I just want to see everything, right? I loved it. My husband's like, no, I feel uncomfortable. Like in high school when we had that, like I declined to go. I'm like, why did you decline to go to the Hindu temple? It's amazing. I want to see everything. Okay. One of the people that I love the most are the Buddhists, right? Because they're so peaceful, right? Little Buddhist monks, little Chinese guys, like, I shouldn't say that at SMSB, but like, you know what I mean? Like little short little guys, bald little guys, the cute like orange like looking outfit. I love those guys, right? They don't kill bugs because the bugs are gonna come back, so they just like, put them outside. I love those guys, so peaceful, right? I love those guys. The prodigal son is a parable that exists in Christianity and in Buddhism, okay? In Christianity, we know what happened, okay? Prodigal son took his father's, whatever, his inheritance, left, blew it all on parties and cars and whatever, fast women, whatever it is, okay? Came back, like, tail in his hands and said, please forgive me. And the father said, everything is forgiven. You are my son. Come in, okay? What you don't know is that in the Buddhist faith, okay, these Buddhists, these peaceful little old guys, okay, those guys, like the fat Buddha, like these laughing guys, okay? Same parable exists, but the debt was not forgiven, okay? When the son returned, it was, you can work in my household X amount of years until you repay my debt. It wasn't that you walk in and because you're my son, you're entitled. No. It was that you must learn the value of money and hard work, and you work X amount of years until you've repaid what you blew, and then you are one of ours again. Like, to me, the Buddhists are up here, right? Like these cute little guys. But even the Buddhists don't show the same level of mercy that we are called to show as Christians. Even the Buddhists who don't kill the bugs, okay, don't show the same magnitude and comprehensiveness of mercy the way we are called to do. I'm not like super theological about the faith of Buddhism, but I can tell you that if I were to guess, my guess would be because in that situation, forgiveness is about teaching that other person. But in our situations, forgiveness is not about that other person. It's about you. It's about what you get from being able to forgive. You can either choose to get better when somebody hurts you or to be bitter. They may not deserve to be forgiven, but you deserve the life that you are promised that will come from you being forgiven. Now, last thing, did I run over time? Maybe. Like 3 minutes and I'll overtime. Last thing, okay? I want to make a clarification. So I also want a disclaimer that this is something that I struggle with, right? Because it's not that like I dwell and I whatever. If somebody offends me or annoys me or whatever, I just like shut the book and I move on, right? Like I'm very quick to like, all right, out the door and I move on. I don't dwell, I don't try to like stay friend, I don't do that because I don't like talking about feelings and stuff like that. That stuff is uncomfortable for me, okay? So this concept of like handing forgiveness out like water is very difficult for somebody like me because it means I have to like talk about it. I hate talking about it, okay? However, it's also difficult for someone like me because I am like uber logical, okay? My husband is one of those people that's like governed by feelings and like when he hears God talk, he's a feeling and stuff like that, right? And I don't understand that because I'm a very like outcomes-based person, okay? Like it's black and white, 1 + 1 = 2. That's it. There's no feelings in that equation, okay? So part of this that's difficult for me is that you don't want to be stupid, right? Like you don't want to be an idiot. Like if there's somebody who you're repeatedly forgiving, okay, then you're being stupid, no? Like they're just going to repeatedly like do whatever it is that is requiring forgiveness, okay? But I want to make a clarification, okay? So in Matthew 10, we're called to be as wise as serpents, but as harmless as doves, okay? So what does that mean, okay? That means that if Rames tries to run me over with his car, okay, many times, Every time after OnRoute, I go out to the car, Rama's trying to run me over, okay? I can forgive Ramaz, okay? Ramaz, I wish you no ill, stop trying to kill me, but I wish you no ill will, okay? Like, and you go off and you have a great life and I'm very happy for you because I've forgiven you, okay? But that doesn't mean that every week after OnRoute, at the same time, I walk out to the parking lot and just stand there and let him hit me with his car. I'm not an idiot, right? Just because you've forgiven somebody doesn't mean that you set yourself up for failure again, okay? If I know that Ramaz is trying to kill me, then I'm gonna take a different door. I'm gonna wait till he goes home before I walk to my car because I'm not an idiot, right? So forgiving doesn't mean that you willingly subject yourself to the same level of hurt over and over again, or that you make yourself into a doormat. But what forgiving means is that, like, genuinely, if you were to stand before God and pray for Ramaz, you're happy for him. And you want the best for him. And you want blessings for him. And you don't harbor any anger against Ramaz. But you also know he's trying to kill you. So you're not going to go out in the parking lot by yourself with Ramaz. You know what I'm saying? So there's a little bit of like forgiveness doesn't make you an idiot. It just makes you a dove, right? But you're a dove because you're not like everything's fluffy and happy and whatever, but you're also wise in terms of not walking into certain death, okay? The other thing, and this is like a last kind of addendum, mostly for girls. Sometimes for girls, it is a little bit harder to forgive because of our thoughts, okay? Boys are blessed in that they can only do one thing at a time, okay? So if somebody's annoyed Ramaz, or anybody, okay, any boy, okay, if Ramaz decides that he's not going to sit in his room and be annoyed about this person, he's going to go play basketball. While he's playing basketball, he also can't think about what the other person has done, because now he's playing basketball. And then when he stops playing basketball, he can think. But if he's playing basketball, he's not thinking, right? As opposed to girls, like I could be having a conversation and cooking dinner and doing call with my daughter and stewing about the person who annoyed me, okay? So for girls, sometimes it's a little bit harder because we can have many thoughts about many things at the same time in the middle of actions, but they can't. They can't do it. They just can't, right? So the necessity of controlling your thoughts and controlling how much you dwell on an offense becomes more important for girls, because even if a guy, for example, can't control his thought, it's okay, he just goes and does something else. And now the thought, by definition, is eliminated because he's doing something else. But for us, we have to make a concerted effort to, there's a verse in the Bible, bring every thought into captivity, right? So if you have a predisposition to dwell on something, to make an active effort to push that thought out of your mind and replace it with something else. And it's not easy to do, but it's very possible to do. And being able to do that will also contribute to our ability to offer forgiveness willingly and freely, because it prevents you from dwelling on whatever the offense is. Sense? All right, that was my last disclaimer. Any questions, concerns, clarifications, heresies? Yeah, please.
I just want to clarify your last point talking about being like kind of wise, right? So sorry? Yeah, right. So I was just like wondering, so forgiveness is kind of like, you view it as something in the heart, not in the actions, because like for me, sometimes what I do, I don't hold grudge or I don't hold anger and I let it go. But then at the same time, it just kind of, you're avoiding that person or avoiding this situation, this or that, or you're just kind of protecting yourself, isolating yourself from certain situations that might lead you to get hurt or stepped on. So would we say this is kind of a complete forgiveness, or is still kind of a missing part of it? Thank you.
So I think it depends on your situation. So I'll give you an analogy to kind of show you what I'm thinking, okay? So let's say we take Millie, my daughter, for an example, very superficial example, okay? And Sedella says she doesn't want to be her friend, okay? And Millie says, I have forgiven Sedella, okay? And I wish her the best and whatever. But when there's a social event, okay, and they're all playing, Millie will choose to go here and not here because when she's around Sedella, it hurts her. That's not forgiveness, right? Because you're striving for indifference, you're striving for apathy, right? Where if something good happens, you're happy for them. If something bad happens, you're sad for them, right? It's not that you are harboring any resentment or hurt or bitterness against that person. Now, if every time Millie's around Sedella smacks her in the face, okay? And so when they play, Millie doesn't go here, she goes here because she doesn't want to get smacked in the face. That's different, right? So you're right in saying that the comprehensiveness of your forgiveness is measured in your heart, right? Which is very hard for someone to hold you accountable for because only you know that, right? But if you are avoiding them in terms of self-preservation, that's fair. But if you are avoiding them because you don't want to confront feelings of angerness or bitterness or hurt or resentment, that's different. That's not forgiveness, right? And really, you're the only person who can say that. With that said, though, like what I would disclaimer is that because you're the only person that can say that, you're also more likely to tell yourself what you want to hear, right? Like, I can tell myself that I'm over it and I don't hate this person and, but when they come up conversation and people bash them and it gives me a little bit of joy, I haven't forgiven them, right? Anything else? Nope? Okay. So next week is week 7. I was told to give the announcements, and I'm really bad at announcements because I don't really know what's going on. Let me pull up who's giving the talk next week. Next week is Abuna on the prayer of protection and lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. And then the final week will be October 18th. Which is my brother, and it's the prayer of blessing. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever and ever. Amen. So our series here ends on October 18th. So if anybody has any suggestions or things that they want to hear about after that, please let us know. We're always looking for a good series, or even if it's just a one-off topic, we're always happy to kind of cater to what people want to hear about. All right. All right, and we'll stand up for prayer. And finally, O Lord, through intercessions of your Holy Mother, St. Mary, St. Maurice, St. Verena, and all your wonderful saints, hear us as we pray before you, saying, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. In Christ Jesus our Lord, for thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever and ever. Amen.